everybody, this is Sheets, and sorry my video isn't working, but I wonder if it might be interesting to give you like a behind the scenes look at the way I do some of my behind the scenes kind of quantitative research. Now this is not exactly lineup construction, although we can get into a little bit of that, but just kind of like the stuff that I do before I even speak to Bobby, and the stuff I do before, we even deliver the, I don't say finished product, but I guess the working product to you guys. So what I do is, I get projections, and I tweak projections, and I use, different hard hit rates for hitters and things like that. And what I come up with is this overall grid that I use for both hitters and pitchers that come from just all the different projection systems out there. And what I like to do is I like to start, even though it's baseball, with projections to see kind of what other people are looking at. And then what you do is then you try to see which of these players and teams have upside from that, and how ownership kind of plays into it. So, like, for example, let's look, I have this for every sport, for every site, whatever it is. Let's take a look first at the DraftKings pitchers for tonight, because I do break it down, pitchers versus hitters. So what we have here is we have it listed, all the pitchers that are available tonight. And again, these can change, so you got to kind of stay on the lookout for this. And just different types of projections out there. And this is the way I like to randomize things a little bit, is to take different projection systems and I tweak a little bit here and there. And then what I do is come of kind of like a median of the medians, sort of. And, when it comes to assessing data, always the largest number of samples is best. I do take 3 sets, sometimes 4 or 5. And then we end up with this kind of this average projection. So it's kind of like the average of the average. And this thing here, this column STD, standard deviation, what this is just a little indication of how off different places are with the projections. So if there's a standard deviation of more than, say, 5 for like a pitcher, I'll have to go back and take a look at it. But anything within 2 or 3 is within the realm of, in the realm of normalcy. So you have this list of average points, and then of course, we put in a formula to calculate, to translate that into points per dollar, and that's one way you can go ahead and and rank these guys. But then there's this this Haber metric over here, where what this does is kind of make allocations or allowances for people having bigger raw points. A lot of sites have like implied values and things like that. And this is kind of my way of doing it, where, you want to give someone who rates to get 30 fantasy points a better score for getting, if he's 3x, as opposed to someone who rates to get 2 fantasy points and he's 3x, obviously, because you do want to get the most points. So somewhere between points per dollar and raw points, you want to get kind of a score. So I kind of rank them in terms of this this Haber metric over here. And then what I do is, throughout the course of the day, I'll update this ownership projection. And this is where you get a lot, I shouldn't say a lot of variance, but sometimes you get a decent amount between the main projection sites with respect to ownership. So you got to stay on top of that. So like right now, for example, it's listing Reynaldo Lopez as 40% owned, which I guess it could be, because the way the slate works out, people are gonna want to pay up for Zach Gallen, so they're gonna look to pair it with someone cheap so that they can get to these Coors bats. So this does make somewhat sense. So let's just see how we rank these guys. So let's first rank these guys just by points per dollar and see who kind of plays out. What we're looking for, and this is not too often this happens, is kind of a disconnect between the points per dollar ranking and the ownership rankings. And that's really the key to all of this. So you'll see that Reynaldo Lopez, as we mentioned, was, points per dollar, the best play on the slate. And he is going to be the highest owned, and it turns out the second best point per dollar player, Zach Gallen, is the second highest owned, is actually the highest owned player on the slate, pitcher on the slate. So these two kind of fall in line with their projections. So when I come down on the show and I'll say, oh, I think that Gallen and Lopez are the best plays, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to play them. It means that relative to their salary, they're probably, they're the best plays. But, a lot of other people are going to know that too. Now, what I like to do then is I like to resort based on this Haber value, because I do want to give a little bit more of a bonus to the people that are going to get the highest raw points. So like here, when you do it this way, Gallen becomes kind of the clear number one. And now Lopez is not exactly the, clear SP2, right? Again, the difference in a Haber value or H or whatever, 3 of 3 points is really not a big deal. So, if you wanted to deviate from Lopez and go to someone like Hendricks, if you could afford it, or Rich Hill, if you can afford it, it's probably worth it. Now, again, this ownership thing is always changing. So this is the thing that's really going to drive the decisions that are made is how close these pitchers are to each other, and how whatchamacallit, and how their ownership kind of deviates from that. Now, with respect to other stuff, in other words, I talk about basketball projections, and I say, okay, there are two guys that look the same as far as projections go, the same medians, but one guy's just kind of like that upside type guy. I don't do that as much with baseball pitchers, because that usually is factored into the projection. And pitchers' performance is usually more consistent. I shouldn't say that in that basketball, but it usually is within a decent range of outcomes that I don't need to kind of recharacterize it. So, like, for example, if one guy has a projection of a certain amount and another guy has a projection of the same amount, I don't want to then double count the top guy and say, oh, but he's a strikeout pitcher, because that's already been factored in to the projection. And the other thing is that as opposed to basketball, where you really need a ceiling from some guy to win a GPP, baseball, you don't really need a ceiling from a pitcher. If I could just sign on for these pitchers, say, median projection, for example, I'll take it, because the way you get ceiling is from these batters that have ranges of outcomes from 0 to 30. Pitchers are just not getting 0. It's just not the way it works. So I will just kind of take the median projection if I can come up with a decent estimate of that for a pitcher, and not worry too much about differences between two pitchers with similar medians. So on a card like this, for DraftKings, I would think that Gallen would be clear number one, and 50% ownership is going to reflect that. And then Lopez, Hendricks, Plesac, Hill. So what I would probably do is wouldn't play Gallen and Lopez together unless I was going to deviate from the chalk hitters, which we're going to get to in a little bit. And one thing you could do also is, if you wanted to deviate from Gallen, just to be ultra contrarian, to want to pay up for those hitters and just pay down to pitching. Again, it might be kind of cool to not go with Lopez, to go with, say, Hill and Plesac, or Hill and maybe something like that. Now the hitters, it gets kind of hairy, because there's a lot of players. But you know what? The concept is still the same. And what I like to do with hitters in baseball, again, is really just focusing on how many of them are from the same team, because again, you obviously want to stack in baseball. So what I'll do is the same type of thing. I'll get the projections, I'll fire it in there, I'll put up an average point per dollar over here, and then this H thing, and then I'll list the ownership over here. And then what we'll do is we'll rank them. So let's start by doing it by point per dollar. The problem with doing this point per dollar, it's not a problem, but for hitting specifically, you really don't want to just take minimum cost hitters. I mean, they just don't put up those. You really are looking for, for kind of raw points and ceiling out of hitters. So you could play them as part of stacks, but you got to be really careful in just playing point per dollar plays in hitting. But just to see, for example, it is a kind of a good way to get one-off. So like if you rank these guys by point per dollar, you see, these cheap guys are going to be usually the top plays, right? So what I like to do is take all these top point per dollar plays and then I'll just look at ownership and just kind of see if any of them are going to be lower owned. So like over here, like Mondesi's going to be 16%, Upton 12%, whatever it is. But these guys in single digits, Shogo, DeShields, Luplow, Mercado, guys like this, Gordon, they could be kind of decent one-offs if you need to just kind of fill in your lineup. So, oh, by the way, you see in these blank spots here, this is where just one side or one system just doesn't think they're going to play, so they don't give them a projection. But I'll still throw them in there just in case they do play. So if you eyeball this, for example, I mean, before you even, what I do is I eyeball the left. So I eyeball the team. And I'll see if there's a whole bunch of guys from the same team kind of clumped up in the value range. And you'll see that there's like Cleveland and KC, right? Both have multiple guys in this top tier. So you have for KC, you have Gordon, Mondesi, and say Matt Reynolds. I don't even know he's going to play, whatever it is. But this is the way you analyze it. Nicky Lopez, multiple cheap guys within the top tier. And then likewise, Cleveland's got Mercado, Luplow, DeShields, all like clumped in the top tier. So you want to look for those as kind of like secondary stacks or secondary pieces to maybe to top stacks. Now, again, these are guys who are not going to project for that many raw points. So you don't really start your stack with them, but it's definitely, something to keep in mind. So if you re-rank these, as I mentioned, by, accounting for raw points, now what you'll see is some of the more, upside, raw points guys get into the mix. Like you'll see that Mike Trout really rates to be one of the top plays. Okay, now he's going to be high owned, but this is what you do, right? So what I notice from this is I see 1, 2 Angels, 3, 4 Rendon, Botani, Upton, Trout. All of these guys rate to be kind of like in the top, 20 when it comes to just pure rankings. So these are going to be really tough. These guys are going to be really good. And likewise, these Colorado guys got, if Dahl gets in, he's going to be a tremendous play from a projection perspective. And then you'll get Murphy if he gets in, Story, Tapia, as you might expect, all these Colorado guys. You'll also see, again, I'm looking literally for the first time, these Pittsburgh dudes, again, look to be okay. Polanco, Reynolds, Bell, right? So what I'll then do is after I kind of eyeball this, like these are kind of like my kind of like key teams I want to think about. So it's going to be like Angels, Pittsburgh, KC, and Colorado, right? And then what I'll do, just for the hell of it, I will just rank them by just raw points, okay? So like all these guys, if you just rank them by raw points even, that's why Angels and Colorado just really pop as being like the top plays, okay? So, if you think about it, you've got guys that are rated as the top plays on the raw points perspective and from a points per dollar and, even adjusted points per dollar perspective, they're going to be very, very strong plays. So that's the way that's the way I do it. That's the way I kind of just go about just figure out who the good plays are going to be. Now, again, you have to put ownership in here. So here's like one thing you can do just for the hell of it. Like if you rank these guys just by average points, right, you'll see that obviously the majority of them are going to get owned, but you see a little sneaks in here, like Yelich at 5%, Bregman at 7%. Ooh, Bregman's back at 7%. Springer at 7%. So what you can do, like for example, this is what I think about this, is you can play a Springer Bregman kind of mini stack, right? Knowing you're not going to get great value, right? Because like when you re-rank these again based on value, they kind of disappear a little bit. But if you could load it up with some other good value, then you can make kind of a really low owned, high upside mini stack like that work. So Springer and who did I say? Springer and Bregman, presuming he is back for real. Then what I like to do is I kind of like get a sense, and you do this for a while, you know how this works. So really super high this value, Haber value is going to be 30, 30 and higher, but anything over 20 is like pretty good. So what I'll do is kind of have some fun. I'll re-rank these kind of by team, okay, and see like if you get a team with kind of like a clump of guys around that area. So like Arizona's got one guy, that LaCastro. He's going to be a decent value play, but not a lot over 20. Kind of like scroll down a little bit. And you see again all these Cleveland guys like Luplow, Mercado, DeShields. So what you might want to do is if you can get two of these guys in with some of the the good raw points guys from Cleveland, like Ramirez, Hernandez. Ooh, Hernandez looks pretty good for some reason. Ramirez. Oh, sorry, Lindor, Ramirez. You play Lindor and Ramirez with those two cheaper guys in Cleveland. That could be a decent way to go. And you see, obviously, all these Colorado guys are just bunch. You can just basically play whoever you want in Colorado and have good plays. But, you can find maybe decent pockets of, like, not that owned guys. I mean, McMahon maybe 11%. But, again, playing guys over 10% in baseball is really, really bad news in baseball. But we'll see. So that's why I kind of eyeballed this down here. And you have these Kansas City guys getting really super cheap, like Mondesi and Gordon again. But you see these Angels are like really, really good. Like you get a bunch of those together. And then you get down to here and all this, St. Louis looks terrible. I mean, like just terrible value. Seattle, though, like Seattle is interesting because Philip Ervin made it to Seattle. That's interesting. So like if you can get like maybe a two-man Dylan Moore and Philip Ervin, if he in fact makes the lineup, you'll get good value because first of all, it's good value. And second of all, you get leverage against who's he pitching against? Gallen, right? So that's one interesting way to go. So that's kind of the way I do this, and obviously this is all this constantly updates and specifically this ownership updates because, and the other thing you have to always do is you got to update all your projections and everything as you get closer to lock because when you change the lineup, right, your lineup position, that's going to subtly but meaningfully impact the projections. So you do want to update those in that way. So again, I think that, I don't know, some of you might be interested in this. Some of you might just be like, oh, give me the good picks or whatever it is. But some of you might be interested in the way I kind of do things. And I do it a little differently for each sport. But for baseball, even though it's not really a quote-unquote projection-based sport, I do like to start with this, right? And then see, you know what I mean, how much I want to deviate from it and how much – it's also good to see what other people are looking at also. To see if maybe sometimes you'll find guys that are low owned that project well, the people just that fall off the map because of either positional scarcity or whatever it is. So I don't know. I thought this would be interesting. If not, I apologize. At least I had fun. And that's it.